The first thing they teach you about the timestamps is that they don't lie. Everything else in a dispatch center can be wrong. People give you the wrong address because they're panicking. They tell you a man has a gun when it's a phone. They say their husband isn't breathing when he's just drunk, or they say he's just drunk when he isn't breathing. Callers are human, and humans are an unreliable instrument. That's the whole reason the job exists. You are the filter that turns a frightened voice into a clean, structured fact that a deputy can act on. Address, nature of call, priority, units assigned, time received, time dispatched, time en route, time on scene, time cleared. The CAD system stamps each of those to the second, off the same synchronized clock that drives the radio logs and the recorder. You can't backdate them. You can't edit them. That's by design, because someday a lawyer is going to stand in a courtroom and ask why it took 11 minutes to get a unit to a dying child, and the answer has to be a number that no human hand could have touched. I worked nights for Halford County for 6 years. Non-emergency lines and overflow 911, console 4, the corner one nobody wanted because the chair was broken and you could feel the HVAC blowing straight down your neck. I liked nights. The call volume is lower, but the calls are stranger. The 3 a.m. people, the wellness checks, the welfare concern calls from a daughter 2 states away who can't get her mother to pick up the phone. Days handle volume. Nights handle the quiet, wrong things. I was good at it. I'm telling you that not to brag, but because I need you to understand that I knew that system the way you know your own hands, and that's the only reason I noticed. It was a Tuesday in late October. I came in for the 1800 to 0600, which we worked 4 on, 3 off. The day shift relief, a woman named Priya, was wrapping up her log, and she had that flat look people get at the end of a long one. We did the verbal pass down, 2 units out of service, 1 prisoner transport pending, a BOLO still active on a stolen Silverado. Standard. I logged into my console. My credentials, my timestamp, 17:52:14. And the first thing the CAD did when my dashboard loaded was show me, in the recently cleared queue, a call I had closed. That's how it reads when a call resolves. The system attributes the clearing action to the operator ID that keyed it. The clear on this one was attributed to me, my operator number 4471. Nature of call, welfare check. Disposition code, 6, which is GOA, gone on arrival, meaning the deputy got there, found the subject fine or absent, nothing further. Cleared time stamped 17:48:31, 4 minutes before I logged in. Now, I want to walk you through exactly what went through my head because the order of it matters. My first thought was not anything dramatic. My first thought was that Priya had cleared it under the wrong operator profile. It happens. You're tired, you sit down at a console somebody else was logged into, you key a disposition, and it lands under their number. It's an administrative nuisance. So I leaned over and I said, "Hey, did you clear a welfare check off 4 about 10 minutes ago? It's showing under me." And Priya looked at the screen and she looked at me and she said, "I've been on 3 all day. I haven't touched 4. Consoles aren't shared like that. Each one is tied to a position. You can't key a disposition from 3 that attributes to 4. The system doesn't work that way." I knew that. She knew that. So we both did the thing dispatchers do, which is we stopped treating it as a feeling and started treating it as a record. I opened the full incident detail. Incident number was sequential and clean, slotted right where it should be in the night's numbering. The address was 14 Terrell Lane. The complainant field was blank. That alone is unusual. Every call has a source, even if it's an alarm company or another agency. Blank complainant means nobody initiated it, and a call with nobody initiating it should not exist. The unit assigned was Deputy R.E. Kassen, Batch 2-218, Car 41. The narrative field, where the dispatcher types what's happening, had 1 line in it. It said, "Subject does not want contact. Clear." I had not typed that. I had been in the parking lot at 17:48. I'd badged in through the sally port at 17:50. That's its own log. The door system, a completely separate set of records from CAD. So now I had 2 independent clocks, both agreeing that I was physically incapable of having keyed a clearance that the dispatch system swore I keyed. The timestamps don't lie. That's the whole foundation. So either the foundation was wrong, or something had used my number. I pulled the radio audio for the incident. Every dispatch and every unit transmission gets recorded, time-stamped off the same master clock stored on a system the dispatchers can't alter. That's the second leg the whole legal structure stands on. If a deputy was assigned to 14 Terra Lane, there would be audio. Me sending it, him acknowledging, him arriving, him clearing. I cued the time window, 1740 to 1750, console 4. There was nothing. 10 minutes of room tone. The faint hum of the center, a cough from console 2, somebody's chair. No traffic on the channel that Kassen was working. The CAD said he'd been dispatched, gone en route, arrived and cleared, with times for each. 1741 dispatched, 1743 en route, 1746 on scene, 1748 cleared. And the radio, which physically cannot disagree with CAD because a human being is supposed to be the bridge between them, said none of it had happened. That was the first night. I want to be honest about what I did with it because later it mattered. I wrote it up. I filed a CAD discrepancy report, which is the correct procedure. You don't sit on a data integrity problem, you escalate it, because if the system is producing phantom records, then every record is suspect, and that's a catastrophe for an agency. I noted the time conflict, the blank complainant, the absent audio. I attributed it, in writing, to a probable system fault. I copied my shift supervisor. Then I worked the rest of my shift, which was ordinary in every way, and I went home and I slept badly, but I slept. The next night, the discrepancy report was gone. Not denied, not returned with a note. Gone from the queue, gone from my sent items, gone from the supervisor's inbox when I asked her to check, which she did, with the patient face of someone humoring a tired employee. She had no memory of receiving it. The system had no record of it existing, and I understood standing there that I had just learned something about the nature of what I was dealing with, which is that it did not merely create records, it curated them. It could add and it could subtract, and the thing it had subtracted was the one piece of paper that said, "This is wrong." I should have stopped there. I know that now, but you have to understand the specific shape of a dispatcher's mind. We are people who cannot tolerate an open call. There is a physical discomfort, almost gastric, in seeing an incident sitting unresolved on the board, a unit whose status you haven't confirmed in too long, a check that went out and never came back. The job selects for it, and then trains it into you until it's reflex. So when I tell you that I could not let 14 Terra Lane sit, I'm not describing courage or curiosity. I'm describing a compulsion that had been installed in me on purpose by the same kind of institution that I would later understand had installed something at that address on purpose too. I looked up 14 Terra Lane in the records. The first thing I found was that the welfare check from the night before was no longer the only one. There were others. Going back, I pulled the call history on the address and the system returned a list. And the list was long in a way that addresses are not, unless something is wrong with the people who live there or the place itself. Welfare checks, almost all of them. One every few weeks, sometimes a cluster, then quiet, then another. The oldest in the system was from 9 years ago. And as I read down the list, I started to notice the disposition codes, and that's when the second kind of wrong started to come into focus. Every single one was a 6. Gone on arrival, subject does not want contact, clear. In 9 years, not one of those welfare checks had ever resulted in actual contact with a person. Not a single arrest, not a single transport, not a single referral to services, not a single subject GW gone with, taken to the hospital. Nobody had ever once laid eyes on whoever was supposed to be at 14 Terra Lane. Every deputy who'd ever gone out there had come back having found exactly nothing and nobody, and had cleared it the same way, with very nearly the same words. Subject does not want contact, as if the subject were a known quantity, as if the deputies all already understood that the protocol for 14 Terra Lane was to drive out, confirm that no one came to the door, and leave. I pulled the complainant fields next. On the older calls, before they started coming up blanket, there had been complainants, family members mostly. A son calling from out of state, worried he hadn't heard from his father. A sister, a granddaughter. I started writing down their names and their callback numbers because that's the other thing the job builds into you. You verify, you don't assume, you call the source. Over the next several nights, in the dead hours when the lines were quiet, I called them. This is the part I have trouble with, even now. The son who'd called 9 years ago about his father, I reached him. He was older, of course. And when I told him I was following up on a welfare check at 14 Terrell Lane, there was a long pause, and he said in a careful voice, "My father didn't live on Terrell Lane. My father lived on Halsey Street. He died at home on Halsey Street, and I'm the one who found him." I checked while he was still on the line. The call in our system from 9 years ago had his name, his number, the right date, and the address, 14 Terrell Lane. He had never said those words. He had given us Halsey Street. The system had taken a real grief, a real call about a real dead man, and it had moved it. It had relocated the man's last unattended hours to an address he'd never been to, and filed the deputy's response as a routine GOA, so that nowhere in the official memory of Halford County was there a record of an old man dying alone on Halsey Street. There was only another quiet welfare check at 14 Terrell Lane, where the subject did not want contact. I called the others. It wasn't everyone. Some numbers were dead. Some people wouldn't talk to a dispatcher calling at 1 in the morning. I don't blame them. But of the ones I reached, the pattern held. Each of them had made a real call about a real person they were worried about, somewhere in the county. And each of those calls in our records had been quietly readdressed to 14 Terrell Lane and closed as nothing. The granddaughter. The sister. In every case, the person they'd been worried about had in fact been in trouble, had in fact, in most cases, been beyond help by the time anyone could have gotten there. And in every case, the record we kept said a deputy had driven out to Terrell Lane and found no one who wanted contact and gone home. I need to be precise about what I understood at that point because I understood it wrong, and the way I understood it wrong is the reason for everything after. I thought, this is a cover-up. I thought, somewhere in this agency, somebody built a mechanism for losing welfare checks. Maybe years ago there was a death the county didn't want liability for, a check that didn't go out in time, and somebody figured out you could make the problem disappear by readdressing the call to a property that didn't really have a resident and clearing it clean so that the slow ones, the ones we got to too late, just stopped existing as failures. A drain in the floor of the records, and 14 Terrell Lane was the drain. I thought I had found corruption. Institutional, human, ugly, but human. So I drove out to 14 Terrell Lane on my night off. It's real. That was the first thing. Part of me had expected a vacant lot, a fiction, an address that resolved to nothing. But Terrell Lane is a real road on the north edge of the county, past where the streetlights stop. And 14 is a real house, a small one-story, older, set back from the road behind a yard that had gone to seed but not to ruin. The kind of place an elderly person lives in for 40 years until they can't. There was a light on inside, one window toward the back, a warm, low light, like a single lamp. I sat in my car across the road for a long time. I'm not a deputy. I had no business approaching, no authority, no reason that would hold up if anyone asked. But I had spent 2 weeks learning that everyone who was ever sent to this door came back saying, no one answered, and there was a light on, and I am, at the root of me, a person who cannot leave a check uncleared. So I walked up the path and I knocked, and someone answered. I want to describe this carefully. The door opened not all the way, the width of a face, and there was an old woman there, small, white-haired, a cardigan. She looked at me with an expression I have spent a long time trying to name, and the closest I can come is recognition without warmth, like a clerk who's seen your file. And before I said anything, before I could give my name or a reason, she said, "You're early." And then she said, "They usually call first." I said I was sorry, I must have the wrong house. And she said, "No, you have the right house. You always have the right house. That's what makes you the right one." And she looked past me out at the dark road and she said, "Did you bring a name with you, or do you still have to look it up?" I did not understand the question then. I understand it now, and I'll get to that. I asked her if she was all right. It was the only true thing I had. "Are you all right, ma'am? This is a welfare check." Essentially, the words came out of me by reflex. The script, the procedure, even with no badge and no authority. And she smiled, and it was almost kind, and she said, "I'm always all right. I don't want contact. You can clear it." And she closed the door, and I heard no lock, no footsteps, nothing. just the door shut and the lights still on behind the back window and the enormous quiet of a road with no streetlights. I drove home. I did not sleep. And at some point before dawn, I sat up in the dark because I had finally understood the thing about the timestamps. The timestamps don't lie. That had been the foundation under all of it, the reason I trusted the records enough to be horrified when they were wrong. But I'd had it backwards. The records weren't being faked to hide something a person did. The records were the most honest thing in the building. A deputy really had cleared 14 Terrell Lane the night before my shift. The welfare check really had resolved itself at 17:48:31. The reason there was no radio audio wasn't that someone deleted it. It was that the radio captures what happens in our reality on our clock between our people, and the clearing of 14 Terrell Lane doesn't happen in our reality. It happens in the records first. The CAD entry isn't the report of the event. The CAD entry is the event. Something out at that address files the check before anyone goes, closes it before anyone arrives. And then the deputy's memory and the radio log just quietly fail to contain a thing that, as far as our world is concerned, was already over before it began. And it had used my number, 4471, the night before my shift even started. It had reached into the system and closed a check as me. It had chosen me 4 minutes before I sat down. You always have the right house. That's what makes you the right one. I had thought I was investigating it. I hadn't been investigating it. It had been addressing me, because that's what the place does. It doesn't lose welfare checks. It receives them. Somewhere in the architecture of how this county keeps track of the people it's supposed to keep alive, there's a thing that lives at 14 Terrell Lane. And when someone in Halford County is slipping past the edge alone, unreached, about to die in a house with the door locked and nobody coming, the system routes the check there instead, readdresses it. The old man on Halsey Street, the granddaughter's grandmother, their last hours don't get a real response because their last hours get delivered to Terrell Lane, to the woman in the cardigan, who takes the contact so that no one else has to. Subject does not want contact. It was never the subject talking. It was her, closing the door on every dying person in the county so that the record could say, cleanly, truthfully, that we tried, and no one wanted us. She is what's at the bottom of the drain, and the drain has to be operated. A check doesn't readdress itself. In 9 years of records, there was always a dispatcher's number on the clearance, always a real operator who, somewhere in their shift, in a minute they'd never remember, keyed a disposition they didn't key. The system needs hands. It had been borrowing other dispatchers' hands for 9 years, a different number here and there. Never the same one twice in a row, spreading it thin enough that no one ever noticed they'd cleared a call they had no memory of. Because who remembers one GOA among thousands? But I'd noticed. I traced it back to the source, made the calls, driven out, knocked. Did you bring a name with you, or do you still have to look it up? She wanted to know if I understood yet which side of the door I was on, whether I was still a dispatcher who had to look up the next person to deliver, or whether I'd become something that carried the name already. I didn't go back to work for 2 days. When I did, I went in early, before my shift, and I logged in, and I watched my own recently cleared queue. At 17:46, a welfare check appeared on the board. Complainant blank, address 14 Terrell Lane, nature welfare check. And as I watched, without my hands moving, the disposition populated. Code 6, GOA, and the narrative field typed itself. One character at a time, the way text does when something patient is doing it, and it said subject does not want contact. Clear. And the clearing operator was 4471, me, while I sat with my hands flat on the desk, not touching the keys. The incident number was for a call that hadn't come in yet. I pulled up the next several minutes of the non-emergency queue, the live one, and I waited, and at 17:51 a call came in for real, a man, frightened, saying his mother in the north part of the county wasn't answering. She had a bad heart. Could someone please go check? He gave an address, a real one, not Terrell Lane. And I sat there with the headset on, and I watched the system take its real address, and his real mother, and his real fear, and reroute the incident, the address field rewriting itself, to 14 Terrell Lane, where, according to the record I had apparently already created 5 minutes before this man called, a deputy had already gone and found that the subject did not want contact and cleared it. His mother was already at the bottom of the drain. The check was closed before he finished dialing. And it was closed under my number because I was the one logged in, because I was the right one, because I had walked up the path and knocked and let it know I understood. I could have said something to him. That's the choice, if you want to call it that, the moment the whole thing comes down to. There was a real address in front of me, a real woman with a bad heart, alive right then, in the minutes the record claimed were already over. I could have keyed a real check, a real unit, a real deputy, a real radio with a real timestamp, and sent help to where she actually was, and broken the thing wide open, made it visible, forced someone above me to look at 14 Taro Lane and ask what it is. I told him a unit was on the way. I gave him the reference number. The reference number was the Taro Lane incident. Then I cleared the call. I want to tell you I don't know why, but I think I do, and it isn't supernatural, which is the worst part. It's that I am a dispatcher, and a dispatcher cannot tolerate an open call, and the system had taught me for years that a closed check is a good check, that the green disposition is relief, that the board going quiet is the whole point of the work. The thing at 14 Taro Lane didn't have to compel me. It only had to be the same shape as the compulsion that was already in me. It offered me what the job had always offered: the clean clear, the resolved line, the quiet board, and all I had to do to get it was nothing. Just let the address rewrite itself. Just let the record be true. I still work nights. Console 4. Nobody else wants it. The calls come in, the frightened sons and the worried daughters 2 states away, and most of them get real units and real deputies and real help because most people who are slipping can still be reached, but some of them can't. Some of them are already too far down, already locked in a quiet house with no one coming. And when those calls come in, I feel it before the address even rewrites, a kind of recognition without warmth. And I know that this one is going to Taro Lane, and I know whose number is going to be on the clearance. It's always mine now. It hasn't borrowed anyone else's number in months. It found the right one, and it stopped looking. She asked if I'd brought a name with me. I didn't understand then. I understand now because lately, in the seconds before a check reroutes, before the man on the line has even said his mother's name, I already know it. It arrives in me ahead of him. I carry the name now. I don't have to look it up anymore. That's what makes me the right one.